Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to welcome you all to this conversation on DPRK human rights. Our panelists today, Mr. Joseph Kim, Ms. Jae Jo, and Ms. Kim Hye-suk will be sharing their testimonies regarding their experiences living in DPRK. I would like to warmly welcome them and thank them for bringing their stories to the United Nations. Last December, I had the privilege of briefing the Security Council on the situation of human rights in DPRK on behalf of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. This was the first time that this challenging situation had been brought to the Council's agenda. It represented a milestone in the years of tireless advocacy from victims groups, civil society and others to bring improvements and ask for accountability for those responsible for the gravest violations. In that briefing, I highlighted the plight of the brave individuals who have suffered immensely and have told the world of their experiences and the terrible crimes that they have endured in the DPRK. Their testimony was the foundation of the work of the Human Rights Council's Commission of Inquiry that took place last year. The Commission stated that the DPRK is a state that does not have any parallel in the contemporary world, one that is characterized by the denial of the rights to freedom of thought, conscience and religion, as well as the rights to freedom of opinion, expression, information and association. It warned that these human rights violations were committed in a widespread, systematic manner as deliberate policy directed by the highest level of the government. In many instances, the Commission of Inquiry concluded these violations constituted crimes against humanity. What is now needed is continued focus by the international community on the plight of the millions of people in the DPRK who remain subjected to mass human rights violations. To this end, in June this year, the Human Rights Office will establish an office in Seoul, which will be dedicated to following up on the groundbreaking work of the Commission of Inquiry, increasing support for the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the DPRK, and serve as a center for documentation, technical assistance and advocacy in order to promote accountability with a view to improving human rights in the DPRK. It is my sincere hope that the international community will continue to examine ways to prevent and punish the crimes that are being perpetrated in the DPRK today. On 18 November 2014, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 69/188 on the situation of human rights in the DPRK. The resolution decided to submit the report of the Commission of Inquiry to the Security Council and encouraged it to consider referral of the situation in the DPRK to the International Criminal Court. Subsequently, following a vote in the Security Council, the situation in the DPRK has now become an agenda item for ongoing discussion at the Security Council. Over the past year, we have seen new signs of engagement by the DPRK. For instance, in March this year, for the first time, the DPRK foreign minister attended the Human Rights Council in Geneva to defend his country's record. The DPRK also participated constructively in 2 rounds of the Universal Periodic Review process. We must nurture and build upon these tentative signs of engagement. The tireless efforts of the international community, civil society and the victims for whom we will hear today is working. It is working towards bringing the DPRK to the realization that violations will not go unseen and unpunished, and above all, that will, with the right reorientation of policy and engagement with the international community, there can be meaningful improvements. Now, in 2015, we must seize this historic opportunity to bring to an end this suffering and secure real improvements in the human rights situation in the DPRK. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear? I'm Barbara Demick. Good day. 안녕하십니까? I have been covering the DPRK since 2001. I wrote a book about North Korea called Nothing to Envy, and I've also been writing for the Los Angeles Times and the New Yorker on the subject. I'm delighted to be here and have this opportunity to speak to you, and I'm even happier that you will have an opportunity to hear firsthand from these three very brave people. Over the years that I've been covering DPRK, I would say that I've conservatively spoken to 200-300 North Koreans, North Korean defectors, as well as North Koreans who crossed the border to work in China. And when I was reading in advance the testimony of these people, I realized how familiar their stories are. You have three people here who, through strange circumstances, ended up before you, but there's thousands, millions more like them. Joseph Kim was orphaned when his father died of starvation, and his mother went off to get food. He's what we used to call a kochabi, a wandering swallow who left to look for food. You know, you can judge his story as you will. I know so many people who are just like him. Very similar story for Jae Zhou, whose parents were unfortunately, victims of the famine. Grew up as a very ordinary person, not a political family, nothing special, and ended up subsumed in tragedy. Kim Hae-suk's story is somewhat different. Through no fault of her own, through a crime committed by a grandfather she barely knew, she was sent to Camp 18, one of the large gulag prison camps. And we have photographs ahead for you to see. As you listen to their accounts, I'd like you to keep in mind, how many people are represented by their stories. I've been interviewing North Korean defectors up to last year at the border. And by the way, as I said, some of them are not defectors. Some of these people have come across to China in order to get food, in order to work, in order to see family. Many of them are members of the ruling Workers' Party. They are loyal. They love their country. They still refer to Urinara, our country. But they can tell you the same stories of a population that is kept perpetually in a state of semi-starvation. And I will open with Mr. Kim. Thank you.
Before I start my remarks, I wanted to thank you for your great work, putting all the stories together in such a great way, and I appreciate that your time. And I heard so many great feedbacks, and many friends always praise about your book, and it's truly an honor to meeting you in person.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my story with you. It is an honor, but also a burden, because this isn't just my story, but the story of millions of people in North Korea today. I was born in 1990 in Hamgyeongbuk-do, a province near the border between North Korea and China. Although my family constantly struggled with poverty, I was always loved and cared for because I was the only son and the youngest of two children. The Great Famine began when I was very young, and it slowly took away my privileges to be a child. It affected my life tremendously, and many children like myself have experienced hardships that no one should have to endure. However, I think being a child has its perks because despite the difficulties, my friends and I found a ways to have fun together. Some of my favorite memories of as a child involves learning how to play soccer or cycling with my father, which I'm grateful for such memories because that's all I have left to remember as my family. My father died of starvation when I was only 12 years old. At the same year, my mom fled to China with my older sister. I assumed that they would return shortly. Plus, my sister and I had never been apart, and I thought that for sure we would be together forever. So I didn't even say a proper goodbye. I didn't even give her a hug. To this day, I think this has been one of my biggest regrets. I never saw my sister again. My mom returned a few months later. She was alone. I vividly remember how she struggled to tell me that she had to make the difficult decision to sell my sister because she believed my sister would have a better chance to live life in China than returning to North Korea. Now I think about it in retro perspective. She had made that sacrifice so that she could save me at least. But as a child, it was very difficult for me to process and understanding my mom's reasoning and explanations. But now that I have become an adult, I wish I understood her at the time. I was always worried about sharing about what my mother did, not just because it was a traumatic experience for me, but also because I was afraid that people would judge my mom. However, over the years, I have come to realize it's important part for me to share this part of the story because unfortunately, this is the reality that so many other families face. The world that North Koreans live in is one that is harsh and desperate enough to break even the closest family's ties. My mom was eventually caught for going back and forth to China and was sent to a prison labor facility. As a result, I became homeless. In order to survive, I had to give up my right to live a dignified life. I no longer lived like a human being. I used to be so shy that I could not even speak to my classmates in school, but all of a sudden I found myself on the street, begging food from strangers. At the age of 12, before I had a chance to decide who I was on my own terms, my identity was defined by others. I was homeless, an orphan, a beggar. When I approached people in the food courts in the city markets, they would sweat me away like a fly. My biggest hope during this time was to see my sister again. When I could not fall asleep because of the hunger pain or bitter colds, I used to imagine that the next morning my sister would come back to wake me up with my favorite food. That hope kept me alive. Every day I told myself, no matter how hard things got, I must live until I see my sister again. I lived like this for 3 years until I was about 15, and I realized I couldn't survive much longer. So I finally decided to go to China to look for my sister. To this day, I don't know where my sister is at, but I have not yet given up hope to see her again. I eventually began a new life in America when I was 16 years old, and although my life has completely changed, I spend a lot of time thinking about where I have come from, my home, the country I loved, and the friends and family I had to leave behind. I often wonder why North Koreans have to suffer so much and what I do about it. I'm sure many of you here wonder the same thing. While some find ways to offer assistance, others prayer, some are simply angry and indignant. A large majority of people are indifferent. I hope, however, that as citizens of this world, you will all be able to stand before your respective audiences and raise a voice of concern for North Korea. I also would like to ask you to continue lending an ear to the story of North Korean people. So much about my country is buried and lost in political conversations. Sometimes we forget that North Korea is not just a country veiled in a dictatorship, but that there are people who have hopes and dreams, like myself, my mother, and my sister. Alone, I am one, but together, I know that we can bring light to even the darkest corners of the world's most isolated country. Thank you for taking the first step, or perhaps even your 100th step, in doing so by being here today. Thank you so much.
I think you'll have a chance to speak in the question and answer. So please. Where is it? Yeah. Can you wait till the break? We will give you a chance to speak.
Sir, you're discrediting yourself further by interrupting the proceedings. We will continue our panel, and you can speak when the panel has concluded. It's almost better. I think the audience will agree that it's better to allow the DPRK to speak, since it is a self-discrediting exercise, and we will resume our panel. Conclude your statement, and we will go back to our panel. There's no need for a microphone.
Let him finish the statement unless you want to drag that, and then we'll go ahead.
Extreme racial discrimination and sexual abuses against women. Every day we hear the human rights violence cases in radio and televisions. These #1 leads are just a bit of icebergs among the human rights violations committed in the U.S. every day.
Please shut the mic down, since this is not an authorized presentation. If we could ask the acoustic
The
people.
acts of racial
Please ensure that the microphone is not live. Thank you.
아니, 아무리 무식한 나라라고 예절도 없어요? 순서가 끝나지 않았잖아요. 나라를 대표했다는 사람이 그따위예요?
How long is this speech going to go on? Because I will give you a chance to speak, but we have a proceeding to follow. I'm sorry, I'm still journalisting off the show.
There is something to be said for it. This will get attention.
So we are calling UN security. Sir, you can either conclude your remarks or you will be removed from the room.
저 말 같지 않은 거짓말 들을 필요도 없어요, 저거.
입싹 들어막아라, 저거.
Free North Korea!
뭔 소리야, 진짜. 야, 저기 악질이로구나, 저기.
This is, if you want to speak with your mic on, I will give you the opportunity because we do want to hear what you want to say, but I'm going to let her start speaking now. If you want to have a chance to have your words heard with a microphone, we will turn you on. But after, in the appropriate time. I'm giving you a chance to speak with a microphone, but you have to do it at the appropriate time.
끌어내라고요. 저 왜 못 끌어내는가고.
We cannot call the security person.
저 악질적으로 나온다, 야. 엄마, 야, 열해. 말하지 말까, 열해. 좀 가만히 있어.
또라이.
야.
If you're finished, we can go on. Really, you will have a chance to speak.
끌어내라. 아니, 이거 이렇게 한 사람 아닌데 저거 무슨 낙지보다.
Can we go forward, please? Again, you will have a chance to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, he's had his chance.
He's had his chance. Okay. All right. I will let J.Jo speak. That is the program.
Yeah,
Turn on
it's
your
on
microphone.
now.
Okay.
It's on. Go ahead.
That's my turn. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jin Hye-jo. I am North Korean defector who was naturalized to become U.S. citizen. Right now, I'm the American citizen.
나가. 야.
Now I am living in Virginia, close to the capital of the U.S., Washington, D.C. I am working as manager at the biggest adult care center in Virginia. And I also serving as the representative of NK in USA, which actively working to the rescue North Korean refugees and help their resettlement in the U.S. I am now living with my younger sister and my mother, who saved our lives by risking her own safety. My mother is still suffering due to the torture she got when repatriated, but never gives up and becomes successfully resolved. My sister is working as an office manager at the company where a few hundred personal care aides are working at and enjoy her life just like any other American citizens. We could come to the U.S. because of the help of Pastor John Yun and Suzanne Shorty. We are in prison over a year in China because we worked with the Christian missionary, but managed to come to the U.S. to live a happy life. Back in North Korea, there were 9 members in my family. In 1997, my parents often traveled to China in order to get the food for their children. But they were raised by security agents, and my mother, who was 3 months pregnant, was tortured up to the point that she could not use her legs. And released months later, but my father died out of starvation and torture on the way to be transferred to another prison. The regime said he was shot to death because he was trying to escape, but it was not true. My sister and I had to wander around in order to find food, and sometimes walked 17 miles to get the salt. Sometimes the kids in older town threw stones to us, so we had to hide in a mountain and came out only at night. The road to get food was very mountainous, so I had to grab anything that would keep me from falling down. And my hands were all scratched by grabbing branches. I had to dig the ground with my bare hands in order to get the real grass. Every time I washed my hands, it hurt so much because of the scratches and calluses, which made me cry all the time. Without my fathers around us, our family struggled, and the news of my father passed away in January 1998 shocked my mother so much that she gave birth to a baby in March, 2 months earlier than her due. I still remember that day, cried as I wiped the blood on the floor. I carried my newborn brothers in my arms. I cried and shook my mother, scared by the fact that my mom would die out of bleeding. Compared to the hospital in the U.S. seems like heaven. So I often make a joke to my mom, who is almost 60 now, to give a birth to another sisters or brothers. After only a week giving birth to my brother, my mother left to find my oldest sister, who went to China to find food, but ended up trafficked and crossed the cold ice Tumen River. But by the time she came back, she found that her youngest son starved to death. In North Korea, the security agents and community leaders kicked me out and beat me with the broom, who asked to give just handful of corn flour for my dying brother. Unable to find my sister, my mother came back home and cried for the loss of her baby. But the officers, North Korea regime, beat her head with a stick to break her bone. My grandmother went out to dig out the grass to feed us, but she fainted and fell on grass. She was passed away 10 days later. Her last words was, "I only wish to have 1 steamed potatoes." After we buried her, our family decided to leave the country. Since my mother was not strong enough to carry my younger brothers, we asked our neighbor to take care of him. My mom and I told him that we would come back 5 days later. Then he said, "My dear sister, why do you leave me here when you bring other sister to go with you?" I handed him piece of steamed corn cake and then said, "Mom and I will bring the rice. Your youngest sister will bring you candies and cookies, so wait for us." But we couldn't not go back, and 2 months later, we found out that he died out of the starvation on the street, just like that my family was shattered. Sometimes I question why this many people should starve to death. It makes my heart enraged whenever I think about the North Korean regime. During roaming around 10 years in China, I was beaten and tortured and imprisoned over a year in the Chinese prison with Pastor Zhang Yun. I cannot even describe the terrible human rights situation I have experienced there. I still clearly remember when I was little, I cried and asked why I had to be born as a North Korean child. My childhood is filled with bitter memories that other kids in the village laughing at me who wore recycled clothing and always invade them who went to school every day. I had a miserable childhood that I witnessed my brothers and sisters dying in my own arms. Lost my father who asked me to take care of my mother. Lost my grandmother whose hope was to eat potatoes. And lost my younger brothers who waved his hands to me without knowing we would never see each other again. But now I feel fortunate because I could overcome all of this tragedies and testify in front of you as a free 28 years old U.S. citizen. So I am so happy today, and I feel so grateful. So I want to ask you for a favor. Please give the freedom to the children in North Korea who are suffering like me, so that they can testify that they are now happy just like me. It's my hope that with your help, we can have thousands and thousands of another Jin Hae-jo. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I regret that the gentleman from the DPRK did not remain to hear it. Jae-jo's story, again, it's so familiar. It's so familiar. There's so many people who have experienced this humiliation of hunger and loss. Thank you for sharing it. I will move on to Kim Hae-suk, who has a somewhat different account to tell. She grew up in one of the prison camps, Camp 18. A point I've made before about DPRK is that life everywhere is tough, and it's a matter of gradations. Many of you know that North Koreans are ranked by their loyalty to the leadership. And if you're very loyal, you might live in Pyongyang, then you might live further up in Musan, North Hamgyong Province, Chongjin. And if you're considered disloyal, you end up in a place like Camp 18. It's a continuum in North Korea. There's good places, and there's bad places, and there's worse places. Mrs. Kim grew up in one of the worst places, and we will hear from her now.
안녕하세요. 탈북자 김희숙입니다. 저는 평양시 모란봉구에서 태어나서 잘 살고 있다가 13살 되는 해인 1975년 2월 말 그 어떤 이유도 모른 채 북창에 위치하고 있는 18호 관리소로 끌려가서 28년 동안 그 인간답지 못한 또 개처럼 너희처럼 살다가 28년 만에 밖으로 나왔습니다.
Good morning. My name is Kim Hae-suk. I was born in Moranbong in the city of Pyongyang, and on the year that I turned 13 in 1975, I was suddenly taken to prison camp 18 located in Bukchang, and I was imprisoned there for 28 years, living in a life that is unimaginable, life that is worse than dogs, and living a life that is like a slave.
우선 사람이 살자면 그 먹는 것이 필요하지만 그 제가 13살 때 들어가서 첫 타격으로 받은 것은 먹는 문제였습니다. 그 우리가 7식구에서 썩은 강냉이 7.5kg 내지 8kg를 받아가지고 우리 한 달에 그 7식구가 먹으면서 하루 한 끼 죽을 멀건 죽을 먹으면서 탄강에서 거된 노동을 하면서 살았습니다.
For people to live, we need to eat. The food that was rationed to our family, which is a family of 7 people, was 7.5 to 8 kilograms of corn. And so we had to eat 1 meal a day, mostly porridge, and we had to suffer, but also forced into labor.
말로는 8시간 노동제라고 하지만은 우리 거기에 수감된 사람들은 재수라고 하여 16시간 내지 20시간을 탄강에서 일을 시키면서 그 탄강 사고로 사람들이 많이 죽어나가거나 뭐 다치거나 해도 이 그 탄강 관리 일꾼들은 여기에 아랑곳 하지 않고 우리 그 재수들을 노예처럼 이렇게 시켰습니다.
They say it's an 8-hour working hour. However, we worked 16 to 20 hours per day. And there were lots of accidents in this coal mine. However, they were indifferent whether we were hurt or we died. So we were working like a dog and like a slave.
또한 닫힌 구역이라고 해서 3인서로 모여가지고 한 달 동안 내가 너는 나를 이렇게 서로 감시하면서 그 생활 자료를 써가지고 보위부 담당 수도원한테 바쳐야 됩니다. 근데 몸이 아프거나 또 손이 다쳐가지고 이렇게 돼서 쓰지 못해서 바치지 못하면 보위지도이나 그 담당 안전원한테 끌려가서 벤치로 입을 막 물어 이렇게 뜯어놓고 그다음에 적세로 묶어가지고 요거 쫙 이렇게 발로 누르면 이게 막 피가 안 통하게 이렇게 만들어 놓고 정말 거기서 사람으로서는 그 상상조차 할 수 없는 이런 고문을 우리가 당하면서 살았습니다.
In this prison, we were divided into 3 per group, and we were supposed to monitor each other and write up a detailed report of what the other person has done to the instructor. And if we were not able to do that for different reasons, whether we were sick or we weren't able to write with our hands because we had injured our hands, then they would tear our mouths with pillars, or they would handcuff us to block our circulation. We were beaten, we were tortured.
또한 그 관리소에서는 우리 그 아이들을 뭐 용어, 한문 이런 거는 저는 배우다가 들어갔지만 거기에서는 아예 배워지지 않고 그 혁명사상 그다음에 제가 몰랐던 당정책 그런 과목으로 배워지면서 완전히 이게 세뇌화를 시켜가지고 16살이 되면은 무조건 탄강으로 들여보냅니다. 남자들은 굴진공, 여자들은 채탄공으로. 저도 역시 16살 때부터 30살까지 탄강에서 채탄공으로 일했습니다.
Anybody who stays in this prison camp, we have to do forced labor. Before I went to the prison camp, I was learning English and I was also learning Chinese character. However, once we are in prison camp, all we study is about the revolutionary ideology and also the party policies. And so, in other words, we are brainwashed in the prison camp. When we turn 16, everybody is sent to the coal mine and forced into hard labor.
또한 여기서는 첫째로 자기 죄를 묻지 말라. 자기 죄를 묻는 자에 한해서는 무조건 반항한다는 죄로 공개청살로 많이 죽었고, 제가 28년 동안 거기서 수감돼서 살면서 공개청살하는 거는 수없이 많이 봤습니다. 특히 김일성이가 죽고 김정일이가 정권을 잡으면서 심화적 사건이라고 하는데, 이때 우리 관리소에 수많은 한 2만 명을 몰아가지고 고위직에 있던 사람들이니까 갑자기 이런 관리소에 들어오니까 내 죄가 뭔가고 이렇게 묻는 사람들을 한해서는 무조건 쏴 죽여서 그때 한 2만 명을 총살로 쏴서 죽인 거로 저는 알고 있습니다.
And in this prison camp, and especially in the coal mines, you had to absolutely submissive to anything that was asked of us. If you were to ask questions as to why you were there, we were immediately executed publicly. So I have seen and was a witness to multiple execution in this prison. And after Kim Il-sung died and Kim Jong-il came into power, there was an incident called Simhajo, and they had sent all these people who were loyal to Kim Il-sung to these prison camps. And I've seen about 20,000 people die and come to our prison camp 18. Because these people, most of these people who were sent during this time were high-level officials, they were asking as to why they were taken to this prison camp. If they asked, they were executed immediately.
13살 때 관리소에 들어가서 42살이야 관리소에서 나왔습니다. 나오는 이유도 제가 일을 잘해가지고 돼지, 개, 소, 토끼 길러서 다 바쳤습니다. 이렇게 바치는 기간이 10년 걸렸습니다. 그래서 저는 2001년 2월 16일 김정일 탄생기념일 맞으면서 해제를 받아가지고 28년 만에 나와서야 내가 28년 동안 관리소에 수감되었던 이유를 그때야 알게 되었습니다.
So I was in this prison camp from 13 to 42, the year of when I turned 42. And the reason that I was able to escape from this prison camp or get out of this prison camp was because I was very good with my labor. I raised pigs and cows, and I submitted all these things that I raised to them. So in February 16th of 2001, which was the birthday of Kim Jong-il, I was sent out of the prison camp when I turned 42. And then I realized why I was sent to the prison for the first time.
28년 만에 나와서 알게 된 이유라는 것이 바로 할아버지가 6.25 때 남으로 월남했다는 이유인데, 제가 13살 때 관리소로 끌려갈 때는 할아버지 얼굴도 이름조차 모른 채 내가 13살 때 끌려갔습니다. 13살이 정말 천진난만한 그 나이에 내가 할아버지 대원스님 고맙습니다. 이거밖에 모르던 이런 나이에 이렇게 관리소로 닫힌 구역에 철조망이 4m로 되어 있고 그 안에 철조망에는 3,300의 전기가 흐릅니다. 이런 속에 왜 어린아이를 잡아였는가? 나는 이것이 정말 지금 생각해 놓고 볼 때 너무도 억울한 사연이 저 가슴에 꽉 맺혔습니다.
And so the reason that I found out why I was taken to the prison camp was because of my grandfather who went south during the Korean War. But when I was taken into the prison camp, I did not know the name of my grandfather, nor did I ever see him. And all I knew was, and all I was saying before then was, thank you, the Supreme Leader, Kim Il-sung. So I don't know why they would take an innocent 13-year-old child to the prison camp. And this camp was surrounded by a barbed wire with 330 kilowatt of electricity. And I am appalled how they can take an innocent child who doesn't even know why they were taken there.
이렇게 거기서 28년 동안 살면서 할아버지, 할머니, 어머니, 남편, 남동생, 아이 둘 이렇게 7을 굶겨 죽이고 저 혼자 살 길 찾아 2005년 중국으로 방랑했습니다. 이렇게 하다가 거기서도 3년 만에 또 붙잡혀가지고 다시 북송돼서 제가 갈 곳이 어디 없으니까, 거주한 데가 없으니까 다시 18호 관리소로 끌려 들어갔어요. 6년 만에 그 18호 관리소로 끌려 들어가니까 제가 있을 때보다 더 못한 현실이었습니다. 그때 그 사람이 사람을 잡아먹는 이러한 참상이 막 벌어지고 있었습니다.
So after 28 years of imprisonment in the prison camp, I left the prison with my grandmother, my mother, my husband, my younger brother, and I had 2 children. I was the only one who got out of the prison camp. I went to China in 2005. I wandered around China for 3 years, but I got caught and I was sent back to North Korea. So in 6 years after I left the prison camp, I was brought into North Korea again. But since I did not have any other residence except for that prison camp, I was once again taken to prison camp 18. And I found out the reality or the situation in North Korea was worse, much worse than when I had left it in the past. And the situation was that people were eating other people.
저는 28년 만에 나와서 그래도 내가 거기에 수감되었던 이유라도 알고 지금 이렇게 살고 있지만 우리 동생들은 아직도 거기서 44년째 자기가 왜 수감되었는지 이유도 모른 채 아직 거기서 살고 있습니다.
At least I now know why I was imprisoned, why I was taken to the prison camp. However, my brothers, younger brothers, are still there, and they're there for 44 years now. They still know why they were taken to that prison.
짧은 시간에 제가 28년 동안 살았던 이야기를 다 할 수는 없으니까 질의응답 시간에 그 질문을 받도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
It is not possible for me to tell you the story of my life and 28 years of my imprisonment in a short period of time. So if I have anything to add, if you have any questions, I'll try to take your questions and answer them.
Thank you very much for that moving testimony. We will have question and answers, but before we start, I would like to give the ambassador from the Republic of Korea, Ambassador Oh, a chance to speak.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Ambassador Samantha Power and the U.S. mission for organizing this important event. And I would also like to thank 3 defectors for their testimonies. They are very brave, having gone through all these difficulties and having come here to the United States and standing up to say what they have gone through. And I thank them for sharing the stories with us. I believe we are all gathered here because we are all concerned over what is happening in North Korea, especially when it comes to the human rights situation in the DPRK, which is very dire, as we have heard. The stories of defectors are so sad and so revealing of what is happening in North Korea that they break our hearts. Last year, when we had the Security Council discussion on the North Korean human rights issues, I said that for South Koreans, for us, it is even more heart-wrenching to hear these stories because they are our sisters and brothers. I think what all of us want today, all of us want to see today is a change in North Korea, a change especially in the human rights situation in North Korea. So when we had a COI report last year, when we had the Human Rights Council resolution, when we had the General Assembly resolution, when we had the Security Council debate on North Korean human rights issues, we all thought that DPRK would respond to that. And at one point, I thought we saw a glimmer of hope when North Koreans were saying that they might invite the DPRK human rights special rapporteur to North Korea, and they were saying that they didn't have a problem. They can show it to the world. Whether or not, how much truth was there, we thought there was a glimmer of hope because North Korea, the DPRK, was responding at least to what we are calling for. But the delegation of DPRK today disappointed us. They were interrupting the process, and they should have spoken when they were given a chance. So I'm very disappointed. I think it's a pity. But once again, I thank all of those here for these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will open the question and answer, and just a brief comment. I think DPRK exists surrounded by the greatest economic miracle of our time, South Korea, China, Japan, enjoying tremendous prosperity. And I think most of us in this room, all of us in this room, would like to see DPRK participate in that prosperity and its people able to eat and sustain their lives. And one of the things that I think is very interesting about this conversation is that we're not sort of separating human rights from food security. Often in these discussions, there's a focus on very exotic things, torture, prison camps, something very exotic and sensational. But again, these are the everyday stories, the sort of banality of the human rights abuses in North Korea. I know some people were hopeful when Kim Jong-un took over that there'd be some improvement, at least in the economy, and more openness. I'd like to ask our defectors, to the extent that they have contact with people inside, if they think there has been any improvement. Mr. Kim, do you want to address that?
Sure. I personally don't have the contacts back in North Korea, so I can't really speak on behalf of all North Koreans and the changes, but throughout the researches that I read and heard from experts, I'm not sure how, I do think that I'm not sure whether the economy picked up because of the better system or because of that the North Korean became more customized situations, the lack of food, but it is proven to be by listening other defectors, they're all black market situations that is more accessible now, and even government doesn't have a control over that because they all aware that if they shut down that system, it's going to create another massive starvation and disaster. So in that case, I would say that it is improved, not by the governmental the influence, but maybe from the ground where people started working on it.
I'd like to interpret the question so that the other defectors can answer if they want to. 질문은 지금 북한이 주위에 있는 한국과 중국과 일본 이러한 국가들이 상당히 경제적으로 많이 개선이 되었고 번영이 되었다고 보고 있습니다. 그런데 지금 봤을 때 북한 주민들하고 어떤 연락을 했는지 그 상황을 봤을 때 북한 경제가 좀 더 나아지고 있다고 생각하는지 아니면은 좀 더 악화되고 있다고 생각하는지 또 거기에 대한 발언하고 싶은 게 있는지요?
I was on the phone very often inside North Korea or inside China. But outside looking, they change a lot. But I think when I talked with the inside people, didn't change anything. It is the same. Better things is they can use black market, can find food easily. But everything is similar with than 10 years ago.
This question especially for Mrs. Kim Hae-suk, if you could translate it. In the defector community, you're now out, you're safe, you're free, but is there still fear about repercussions to any surviving family back home based on your testimony?
특히 김혜숙 씨에게 묻고 싶습니다. 지금 본인뿐만 아니라 이 탈북민 커뮤니티를 봤을 때 뭐 이제 탈북했기 때문에 안전하고 자유에서 살고 있습니다만은 아직까지도 탈북민들이 보복의 두려움이라든지 어떠한 두려움 속에서 살고 있는지요?
예, 2013년 말에 저한테 번호 정보 없음 이런 문자로 인연아 살고 싶으면 아가리 다물어라 이런 문자가 들어와서 저간 형사님한테 신고를 했고 작년에는 대낮에 돈 내놓으라고 이렇게 칼 들고 강도가 또 들어오고 어쨌든 저간 인권 일을 하면서 저한테는 좀 마음 놓이고 이런 게 좀 부족하였고 그다음에 작년 10월 특히 여기 왔을 때 유엔에 왔을 때 북한 측에서 9명이 여기 참가했더라고요. 그때 저한테 인간 쓰레기라고 하면서 물론 뭐 인간 쓰레기라는 그 소리가 뭐 새롭게 들려오지는 않았어요. 그러나 한국에 가서 이제는 5년 동안 살면서 전칭호 김 선생님, 김 여사님 이렇게 하면서 듣다가 그런 놈들한테 인간 쓰레기라는 소리를 들으니까 내가 막 격분이 막 치솟더라. 그래서 어쨌든 뭐 마음이 안정을 느끼면서 이렇게 산다고는 말할 수 없습니다.
At the end of 2013, I received a text. It says, if you, and a four-letter word, and say, if you want to live, you need to shut your mouth up. So I reported that to the police officer at the time. And last year, there was somebody who came into my house during the day, and he had a knife, and he was trying to get money from me. And also, when I started working with the Human Rights Commission, I really do not feel I am safe. And last year, in October, when I came to UN, there were nine North Korean people at the meeting, and they called me a human trash. Well, that's nothing new. However, now that I'm living in South Korea and they call me like Madame Kim or Teacher Kim, they call me with respect. And when I heard that they're calling me human trash, and that's been a while, so I was very, very upset and indignant. So I have to say, personally, I do not feel I am safe, and I still feel threatened.
Thank you very much. The panel will take questions.
The green light is
yes, this gentleman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very impressive event. I'm the Perm Rep of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and let me express my deep appreciation and admiration for the courage of those people who have given that personal harrowing testimony. Thank you very much for that. Just would like to reiterate that certainly my country has deep concern about the human rights situation in North Korea. We support the work of the Commission of Inquiry. We need the DPRK to work with all human rights mechanisms of the United Nations, and we need accountability. And the Security Council, in our view, should act accordingly. At the same time, any chance we have for dialogue, we should engage in. We also try to do that on a national basis, how difficult that may be, as we have seen earlier. And one of the questions we're grappling with, certainly within the EU, is the dilemma of food aid. And one of the questions I would like to hear from the people in the panel, how do we solve the dilemma on the one hand giving food aid, but then the danger of abuse by, how shall I say it, by using the food aid just for those who are in power. And once again, deep admiration for the testimonies. Thank you very much.
Yes. 먼저 지금 아주 용기를 가지고 이렇게 놀라운 증언을 해주신 그 여러분들에게, 탈북민 여러분들에게 감사드립니다. 그리고 나는 그 EU 대표입니다. 그리고 그 북한에 관해서 그 인권조사위원회가 했던 여러 가지 일에 대해서 아주 많은 지지를 보내고 있고, 또 북한이 모든 인권 관련된 그러한 조치 또 대화에 참여해야 된다고 생각하고, 또 책임성이 규명되어야 된다라고 생각합니다. 그리고 또 UN 안보리에서도 그 적절한 책임 있는 그러한 그 행동을 계속해야 된다고 생각합니다. 그리고 또 다자적으로 또 양자적으로 북한과의 계속적인 대화를 계속해야 된다고 생각합니다. 내가 지금 드리고 싶은 질문은 약간 그 어려운 부분이기도 합니다. 특히 EU 입장에서는 상당히 그 아주 어려운 그 도전이라고 생각하는데, 식량 지원에 대한 것입니다. 식량 지원이 한편으로는 북한 주민을 돕는 그러한 것이기도 하지만, 그 식량이 특히 고위층으로 간다든지 이렇게 해서 그 남용될 수 있는 그런 가능성이 있다고 생각하는데, 그 식량 지원에 대해서는 어떻게 생각하시는지요?
먼저 제 고향이고 제 나라이고 형제 자매가 살아있는 곳이기 때문에 도와주신다면은 정말 대단히 감사하게 생각하고 있습니다.
First of all, North Korea is my homeland, and it was my country, and it's where my brothers and sisters live. So if anybody who is willing to help, I am deeply grateful.
하지만 북한 정부는 정상적인 사람의 생각을 가지고 있는 사람들이 아닙니다.
However, North Korean government is not a government or a country that has normal viewpoint or normal thoughts.
그렇기 때문에 우리가 원하고 도와주려고 하는 사람들에게 그 식량이 가지 않습니다.
Therefore, the food that we want to give them to help the people that we want to help will not go to these people.
여기 앉아 있는 군대 출신 분들이 많이 있지만 군부대에서 쌀을 먹어봤다고 했고요. 또 제 많은 친구들도 북한에서 살면서 여기서 보낸 유엔 쌀, 한국 쌀 먹어본 적이 없습니다.
I think there are many people from the military who's here. I wonder if they've ever seen or ate rice. I have friends living in North Korea. They have never seen or ate any rice or any food that was sent by UN or from South Korea.
저는 북한에 4번 북송되면서 청진시에 있는 도집결이라는 곳에 잡혀간 적이 있었을 때요. 일할 때 사용되는 용도로 한국 쌀이라는 그 봉지를 가지고 일을 한 적이 있습니다. 그리고 그 쌀은 시장에서 두문이 팔리는 거를 싸먹기도 합니다.
I was sent back to North Korea 4 times, and once I was sent to a city called Cheongjin. And while I was working and forced into labor, I've been working with a bag, rice bag, that had a written Korean rice, 한국쌀, means Korean rice. However, I have not seen the content of the rice, but I've also seen that the rice was being sold in the public market.
혹시 여기 우리 북한 분들이 한 30명 정도 계신데 북한에 식량 보내는 거 찬성 안 하시는 분 손 들어봐 주세요.
I'd like to ask that there are about 30 defectors from North Korea. Those who do not support sending food to North Korea, could you raise your hand? 손 다시 한번 들어주실래요?
이분들은 한국에 있는 탈북자 인권 대표들이기 때문에 이분들이 생각하는 것이 북한 사람들의 80%가 생각하고 있는 뜻이기도 할 것입니다.
These are people who came from North Korea. I believe they represent 80% of the North Korean population and what North Korean population are thinking.
This is a very difficult question. I once introduced a Swiss aid official to a mother and daughter from North Korea, and she asked the same question: should we be giving aid, food aid, or is it going to be misappropriated? And the mother and daughter had completely different opinions and actually got into quite a large argument about it. The daughter said, no, it's only propping up the regime. The mother said, even if it's misappropriated by the army, those guys in the army, they're our sons. So I think it's not simple. We have a long list of questions here. Is there anybody here from the World Food Program or who wishes to address this? I will move on and maybe come back to it later.
이 질문은 굉장히 어려운 질문인 것 같습니다. 왜냐하면은 제가 한번 그 스위스랜드의 뭐 식량 지원 관련된 사람을 북한에서 오신 한 모녀한테 소개를 했는데 똑같은 질문을 했습니다. 그 모녀한테. 그랬더니 딸은 주면 안 된다. 절대로 뭐 딴 사람들한테 갈 것이다라고 했지만 엄마는 그게 군부대로 가더라도 군인들도 누군가의 아들이니까 주는 게 좋다. 이렇게 얘기를 했습니다. 그러니까 이것은 상당히 어려운 질문이라고 생각합니다. 여기 혹시 세계 식량기구에서 오신 분 있으면은 이 문제에 대해서 하실 말씀이 있으신지요?
I think we have several questions. If you would state your name and the question, and maybe we'll answer them at once. You could start over here, and the gentleman from the EU. Use the microphone, please. Yeah.
제 이름은 이복선이고요. 시카고에서 왔습니다. 그런데 조진혜 씨가 지금 질문할 때 조금 포인트가 어떻게 잘 전달이 되는지 모르겠어요. 여기서 북한에서 오신 분들이 식량을 보내는 것에 찬성하시는 분 있습니까? 할 때 우리가 손을 들었는데.
아, 그래요? 아니죠. 보내지 않는 거.
좀 클리어하게 좀 해주세요.
네. 다시 얘기하겠습니다. 우리 여기에 한국의 탈북자들을 대표해서 온 탈북자 인권 단체단들이 여기 있거든요. 그래서 그분들한테 제가 질문을 하는 거는 북한에 식량을 보내지 말아야 된다고 생각하시는 분 손들라고 제가 질문을 했습니다.
Could you just pause so we can get translation, please?
Yes, she was asking whether the question was clearly communicated, and she thought that the question was which of the people from North Korea or people representing North Korean defectors would support sending food to North Korea. However, Ms. J-Jo said no, that was not the question. Who oppose food sending to North Korea? So the original question was correct.
Can we take a group of questions here in the interest of time? I think I'd seen you first.
네, 시간이 없으니까 질문 한꺼번에 받고 하도록 하겠습니다. 질문 계속해 주시죠.
Thank you very much. Can I begin by thanking the US and Korea for hosting this really important meeting. I'm Australia's permanent representative to the UN, and I must say the incredibly moving and horrifying testimony we've heard today, which also, as the moderator reminded us, these are just a few stories. There are many, many, many North Koreans who are still today experiencing similar conditions. I think really make the clearest possible case for why the international community has a responsibility to protect the people of North Korea from ongoing crimes against humanity. It puts a human face to an issue that we sometimes discuss here in more sterile terms, but that responsibility to protect, I think, is really clearly made in your testimony. I have a question and a comment, and it may be difficult for those here today to answer, but we put a lot of effort here into trying to get the situation in North Korea onto the UN agenda. Australia was on the Security Council last year, and with our Korean colleague who is there at the table, we got North Korea inscribed on the Security Council agenda for the first time. It is now there on the Security Council agenda, and we certainly hope there'll be some some further action in the Security Council this year. And of course, the Human Rights Council is very engaged. But is there any way of gauging how important that international pressure is on the regime in North Korea, what difference it can make? I think maybe the reaction by our North Korean delegate shows that they are sensitive to this, but I'd just be interested to hear a little bit more on that. Thank you.
Maybe translate for Mrs. Kim while I'm calling on the others, because in the interest of time, this gentleman. Yep.
오케이, 지금 이거 통역하겠습니다. 이 부분. 지금 미국 그리고 한국 측에서 이 그 회의를 주재해 준. To only this, only. Okay, sure. I understand.
Thank you. My name is Rafael de Bustamante. I work for the European Union delegation here in New York. I want to thank the U.S. For organizing this meeting. I think it's very important to bring these testimonies to the UN membership and hear from these witnesses of these violations of human rights in the DPRK, and bring the attention to all the diplomatic community here. I mean, I had a similar question to the Australian ambassador, so I will not repeat that. But I just wanted to praise the fact that we can keep the discussion going in New York and bringing the international attention to this issue. The European Union and Japan will continue to bring their annual resolution to the General Assembly in the forthcoming session of the GA. And I would like just to also echo the Korean ambassador on the glimpse of hope we had last year, and I think we are still open to dialogue whenever they are open to talk to us, and of course we keep encouraging the DPRK to open the doors to the UN procedures, and especially the Special Rapporteur. Thank you.
If we could try to confine these things to questions, because we're really running out of time, and I can see the lights going.
Thank you very much. My name is Taro Tsuin from the Japanese mission. And first of all, I would also like to join thanking Mr. Joseph Kim, Ms. Jae Jo, and Ms. Kim Hyul-suk for having courage to stand up and speak out how the severe human rights situation in the DPRK is. And your comments were really shocking to us. And the information was also very important because even Special Rapporteur cannot go into there and see what is going on there. And my question is that we, or the General Assembly, is adopting the resolution for 10 consecutive years, and international, from my point of view, international community is having pressure on North Korea as much as they can. And have you noticed any changes on the ground, whether they have changed their attitude by responding to this concern and pressure of the international community? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Doug Hostetter. I work for the Mennonite Central Committee. The Mennonite Central Committee is one of the very few organizations that does do direct food aid in North Korea, just as we did in South Korea for about 20 years after the Korean War. We have now worked in North Korea for about 20 years since their major famine about 20 years ago. Our own experience has been that the food that we have given to 13 different orphanages and the work that we are doing in 3 different collective farms has gotten to the people and has been well used by the institutions that we deal with. The one issue that I would be interested to get the reaction from our guests, and I do want to thank them very much for sharing their experiences, it was very moving, is that the issue of food security for many Koreans has to do with the fact that the war has not ended. The Korean War has not ended. For more than 60 years, we have only an armistice, and there are continual military exercises that take place. I would be curious as to how many Koreans in the audience and in the platform would support an end to the Korean War so that we could ratchet down and demilitarize that part of the world. I thank you.
Questions, and then you could answer as you like. Is international pressure on the DPRK having any effect? And again, do we see any changes on the ground as a result? And should we end the Korean War? Is it time to move beyond the armistice? Yeah.
지금 질문을 요약해서 드리도록 하겠습니다. 지금 여러 가지 국제사회가 하고 있는 그러한 압력이 영향을 미치고 있다고 생각하는지 질문. 그러니까 또 거기에 부원돼서 하는 질문은 그렇기 때문에 북한 내부에 이러한 국제사회의 압력 때문에 어떠한 변화가 있다고 생각하시는지요. 그 다음에 마지막 질문은 지금 현재 그 남북 간의 전쟁이 끝난 것이 아니고 정전 상태에 있는데 전쟁을 완전히 종식시키는 것이 이러한 식량이라든지 이러한 그 안보에 도움이 된다고 생각하시는지요.
Mr. Kim?
I don't exactly know when you said in the groundwork. I mean, I do think that international communities that the pressure that has given in the communities has worked, because when I came to the U.S. in 2007, I used to tell my friends that I'm from Korea, and they would not even bother to ask me which side. After about 7 years later, nowadays that whenever I talk to people, they ask me like where I'm from, and I would often say that I'm from Korea. And I wouldn't really exactly know the exact percentage, but more and more people would actually ask me to specify whether South or North Korea. So I think this also evidence that at least people became more aware about the difference between North and South. And I do believe that the greatness in humanity, I think that most people have not been able to help but because that they didn't really know much about the existence of North Korea. So I think that even news media and the international community's pressure, even just advocating about the issues with the human rights, and I think has in some ways affected in daily life Americans at least. And I actually don't know about the third question. It's
the Korean War.
Yeah. What was the second?
I think this is the same question I asked you. Have you seen any changes on the ground in DPRK as a result of international pressure?
That also, again, I left North Korea about 9 years ago, so I wouldn't really know. But I think that researchers have shown, and North Korean defectors who have recently defected tells me that the society changes in a sense that 3 ways that young generations become less loyal to the government, and more people became independent in a sense that access to black market marketization, and I think that has changed some effect in the ground of changing in the food issues as well.
Yes, I think it's changed a lot. 그냥 한국말로 할게요. 북한 그 두만강 주변에 있는 주민들을 몇백 명씩이나 시골로 추방을 시키고 이제 그러한 이제 조치를 취하는 북한, 또 오늘처럼 저렇게 예의도 없이 아직 순서가 끝나지도 않았음에도 불구하고 이제 하는 반응, 그리고 계속 한국을 향해서 폭탄을 보내겠다고, 핵을 보내겠다고 악을 쓰고 발악을 하는 북한을 보면 굉장히 큰 도움이 된다고 생각이 되고요. 또 조금 그 질문하고 다른 대답일지는 모르겠지만 그냥 유엔에서 세계적으로 우리를 위해서 이제 나서주시는 것 외에도 이 소식을 탈북자들을 통해서 삐라나 라디오를 통해서 북한 사람들에게 전달해지는 것이 더 중요하다고 봅니다.
Yes, I do believe it has an impact. The fact that North Korea is sending hundreds of people that used to live in around the Dumangang area, Duman River area, to a very remote places. And you can see from the response or the actions of North Korean behavior today, trying to disrupt the meeting and has no respect for the protocol or manners. And North Korea is also threatening to send a nuclear weapon to South Korea. Therefore, when you look at all these factors, I do believe that international pressure is helping them to react and to change. Another aspect that I'd like to mention is that it is also to do all of these international actions and measures, but I also think that sending and providing information to North Korean people through radio broadcasting and sending pamphlets to North Korea may be more important to inform the North Korean population.
중요한 행사들이 있을 때마다 국제적으로나 아니면 국내적으로 행사가 있을 때마다 숙박검열이라든지 북한 내에서 이제 그 경찰들 움직임이 더 바빠지고 있고 계속해서 검사를 하고 있는 걸로 듣고 알고 있습니다.
I also heard that when there are very important international or domestic events taking place, such as this, I heard that within North Korea they're ratcheting up their security or police, monitoring the people's movement.
I would just like to try to answer this last question myself a bit, and this is purely anecdotal. A woman I know who spent a lot of time in prison camps told me that when she first went in, when women usually repatriated from China were forced to have abortions, they would be sent back to work. She said then her second stint, or maybe it was her third stint in a prison camp, when women were forced to have abortions, they were given time off to rest. She said, I think that's the result of pressure from the international community. It's not much, but, I personally think, DPRK did not mount a very articulate defense, but they seem very upset about the Commission of Inquiry, and I think that's a good thing. And, I'm just a journalist here, but I would encourage people to keep it up, because when they're angry and they're protesting, it means at least they're listening. And I'll turn it over to Ambassador Power.
Well, first, let me just thank everybody for taking time out of their day to be here. Every one of you, I think, sends an important signal with your presence about the importance of this issue, and especially so many of my colleagues, ambassadors, who've taken the time and heard these harrowing stories. I also, my gratitude to the presenters is hard to put into words. We are all in awe of your perseverance. We know that every time you retell your story, it means reliving the horrors that you have experienced, thinking about your family members, and we want to thank you for putting yourself through that and for enduring that pain so that we have a better sense of what's going on behind closed lines. We're also very grateful to the other defectors who've traveled here today for this event, and your presence, just as that of those up here on the stage, testifies to the fact that these are just a few stories of millions, and we know that, and we really thank you for being here, and every day that you tell your stories to your neighbors, to people around you, you again broaden the circle of people who understand the cruelty of this regime and the pain that your fellow countrymen and women are going through. Barbara, thank you very much for not only being here today, but for dedicating so much of your life to documenting what's happening outside of the public eye. It's been extremely important. I thank my friend, Ambassador Jun-ho from the Republic of Korea, who used Korea's time on the Security Council with Australia, the United States, and other countries to ensure that this issue is seen as and treated as an issue not only of human rights, which it is, but an issue of international peace and security, because it's an extremely destabilizing situation. And it is important that for the first time ever, thanks to the leadership of June and others, this issue will be on the Security Council, not just because of the nuclear issue and the proliferation challenge that North Korea presents, but because the true weapon of mass destruction inside North Korea is the treatment of its people and the destruction of those lives. I do want to say a word about the disruption. I thank the audience, particularly the Koreans among us here, the North Koreans among us, for your patience and your restraint in the face of the interruption that we experienced by the DPRK delegation. This delegation was informed before this event started that it would have occasion to speak as soon as we had heard from the defectors who were the centerpiece of today's event. And unfortunately, as you heard, the delegation chose instead to try to drown out the testimony of these panelists. And I will say it must be chilling for those of you who have been subjected to the terror of the regime to be confronted with bullying and disruption and the kind of behavior that we saw today. But I assure those of you who are up here on the panel and all of you in the audience who are from North Korea that such statements are totally self-discrediting, and nothing detracts from the power and the credibility of the testimony that we've heard today, or, of course, from the horror of your experience which you carry with you every day. I just want to touch on three of the themes that we heard about today in order to underscore the importance of this event and of the human rights crisis inside North Korea. The first is the raw, painful hunger that today's speakers and the people of North Korea these speakers have experienced, the people of North Korea are experiencing every day. It was extreme hunger that took the life of Joseph's father, and hunger that later racked Joseph as an orphaned, homeless teenager sleeping under bridges. It was hunger that killed off, as we heard so movingly, 3 generations of Jae-jo's family members. Her grandmother, who starved to death while digging for grass to eat. Her father, who starved to death in a prison camp where he was sent just for trying to find food for his family. And, of course, her younger brother, who starved while Jae and her mother were out searching for food. Aside from the defectors here today, I suspect none of the rest of us have ever experienced hunger like that, a hunger that is one of the most potent weapons used by the North Korean regime to dehumanize the people of North Korea and to keep them unable to stand up for their aspirations and their rights. And as a parent, I cannot imagine the pain of being unable to feed one's starving child. It's an unthinkable double pain. The second theme that we heard addressed today is of course about the regime's use of terror to silence and divide people. Aristotle wrote that the overarching aim of a tyrannical system is, quote, to endeavor by every means possible to keep all the people strangers to each other, end quote. And we see this at work when Hee-suk talks of prisoners assigned to groups of 3 and told to monitor one another and then beaten with a wrench if they did not comply. And we see it in her description of being forced to watch the executions of fellow prisoners whose sole crime was asking why they had been imprisoned. Third, and finally, we've heard about the complicity of those countries that are forcibly repatriating North Koreans back to North Korea after they have risked everything to escape. Joseph was sent back to North Korea against his will in 2008, and his mother was sent to a prison camp where he suspects that she remains for daring to escape the country. Jae, her sister, and her mother, as we heard, were also subjected to multiple forced repatriations before they finally found refuge in a third country. We know the gruesome punishments that await North Koreans who are sent back against their will, and yet the practice continues every day. It must stop, and we urge China and all countries in the region to protect North Korean refugees and asylum seekers who reach their territories. This is extremely important. Finally, Joseph spoke at the beginning of this meeting about feeling an ever-present burden because millions of people are still trapped in North Korea, in the North Korea that he managed to escape. He knows the human rights violations that he and all of the other defectors here today endured, the hunger, the terror, the forced repatriation, and he and all of us know that those violations persist even as we sit here. And this awareness, this sense of responsibility is what drives defectors to continue to tell their stories even at great pain to themselves. We, the rest of us, cannot allow Joseph and the other defectors here to carry that burden alone. We must ensure that their voices and those of other defectors are amplified here at the UN, at the Security Council, and well beyond. And we must not be satisfied with telling the stories, but we have to collectively continue to ramp up the pressure on this regime so that this system, a system built to strip people of their most basic rights and dignity, comes to an end, and the perpetrators behind the kind of terror and forced starvation that we've heard about are brought finally to account. So thank you all, above all, those of you who've come from North Korea, who've shared with us your burden, and who've relived, again, such painful memories. We leave this meeting activated and emboldened by what you have shared with us and the trust you have placed in us. Thank you.